3 years ago, there was that historic handshake between once for the disputed general elections that saw the two gentlemen come together, have a meeting and decide to, bury the hatchet and shepherd a journey of this particular country towards peace building, towards nationhood, towards unity, and focusing on how we can end the perennial problem of divisive elections. Of course, it is coming on a background of a perennial problem that has hit us since we began having our general elections in 1992. Always, it has been a thorny issue. Every 5 years, there is this cycle of violence, cycle of divisiveness that Kenyans have been treated to every time we are hitting the polls to elect the next leaders. And of course, this particular time, we all remember 2007 actually stood out as one of the darkest moments for the country when 1,000 people died and 600,000 were displaced, courtesy of the skirmishes that followed the disputed 2007 general elections. We saw another round of dispute being witnessed in the 2017 general elections, that for the first time in history we had two presidential elections held in 1 year. That was after the first version of the presidential election was disputed and nullified by the Supreme Court, and Kenyans were requested to hit the ballot and elect a president for a second time during I would say a similar general election. And this is something that has not happened before. It actually sent a clear message that something needed to be done if the divisiveness we experience every electioneering period is anything to go by. So the two gentlemen agreed that they're going to put their political differences aside and walk with Kenyans toward a journey to healing, a journey to peace, a journey to working together as one big nation. But a lot has happened over the 3 years, because we know the Building Bridges initiative was birthed courtesy of that particular handshake. It was strategically crafted on a 9-point agenda that included what was termed as issues that have been ailing this particular country, issues that form the genesis of why we are always divided as a nation. So a lot has happened, many questioning the processes, many questioning even the proposals to amend the constitution. And that is the conversation we are going to be having in studio this morning as we mark the 3 years anniversary of the handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga. Welcome on board. My name is Serfine Achieng and our sign language interpreter is Lensa Odingo. A lot is in store for you as we continue. Please interact with us at Serfine_Achieng at KBC Channel 1. That is where you find us online. But I'll not be having this conversation alone. Of course, bringing in those who understand the analysis of the issues and they can read from the trends and tell us what this means for you and I. And joining me now is Job Ndege. He is a governance and leadership expert. Thank you so much, Job, for creating time for us.
Thank you, Serfine.
It's been a long time.
Very long time, but thank God that I'm alive and I can see that you're also alive.
Yes, I am, and I'm happy to have you once again.
Good.
We'll be looking forward to you sharing your insights as we mark 3 years since the handshake. And of course, we'll be expecting Lydia Mathia. She's a political strategist. She'll be joining us on set in a bit, just to give us also her perspective on this particular matter. And it's a show for you, so continue keeping us company and sharing with us your thoughts as we proceed. Remember also, in the course of this broadcast, we'll be linking up with our reporters on the ground as we follow up on some of the events that are happening in Kenya's capital and other parts of the country. Now, very quickly, Job, just to bring you into the conversation, 3 years, we're marking the anniversary of this baby known as the handshake.
Yes.
I don't know whether the handshake is the baby or the BBI is the baby, but depends on how you look at it. Yes. Your quick thoughts on the status of the handshake on this particular day, just your general thoughts about this particular anniversary.
First of all, it was very timely. We were doing very badly as a country before His Excellency the President and the Right Honourable Prime Minister shook hands on 9th of March 3 years ago. You have very well put the backdrop of that. But other than that very immediate issue that we were fighting, the elections are disputed, the two principals actually went back memory lane and they traced our problems right from independence. And that's something which to me was very visionary and very commendable. They said that we have had issues whereas our founding fathers had 3 principles that they were looking at, Ujinga and such. We had not really passed that. Those 3 things of poverty, education, and health for all, we had not really passed there. So the 2 principles traced our problems right from there, and they resolved and they vowed to us as a nation on the steps of Harambee House that they are going to do all they can within their powers to ensure that Kenya does not go back to where we have missed the boat from 1963, and more so to where we have had issues since multipartyism, where every other 5 years we waste 2 years in terms of violence and campaigning, and then we have 3 years of, again, divisions, and the economy basically gets battered, and the cycle continues, tribalism and such. So looking back, we have made quite some steps. I'm happy that they took that decision. We are still in the process of actually fully realizing what they wanted. You remember after the handshake, they came up with a 9-point agenda. That 9-point agenda birthed what was called the BBI. And the BBI basically had several components. There are 4 of them that the task force actually unveiled that are going to solve what the issues that Kenyans spoke about, the 2 principles actually talked about. So at the moment, we're in the phase where we are going to carry out a referendum sometimes in June or July, depending on the courts. And if that referendum goes through, then that one aspect of BBI, which is constitutional reforms, will actually be achieved. There's administrative actions which need to be done, policy and legislative actions in relation to constitutional reforms. So all those 4 aspects are needed to fully implement the BBI as it was envisioned.
Yeah, true. Of course, we'll be getting into the nitty-gritties of this handshake and the handshake that birthed the Building Bridges initiative. Just to understand 3 years down the line,
yes,
how are we progressing in this journey towards a new Kenya and the promises that have been, very well captured in the 9-point agenda that is the BBI initiative. We'll be talking about that right in this particular conversation. But it's coming from a background, like I told you, of a history of a country that is always put on a standstill, like my guest Job is sharing this morning. It's always put on a standstill every time Kenyans hit the ballot to elect their new crop of leaders. Every time we spend, like Job has said, we spend a better part of the first 2 years healing from the wounds that the election created, the economic wounds, the emotional wounds, and so many other aspects that, every election brings to us as a country. And we again are caught up in another cycle of preparing for the next general election. So it leaves us with very little time to focus on nation building, on development, on even giving the government of the day time to deliver their mandate to Kenyans. So the 2 gentlemen, that is President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga, coming together on 9th of March, the year 2018, at the steps of Harambee House to shake hands. That was a symbolic, move just to show that they've decided that they're going to put their political differences aside and, shepherd this country to a new direction of peace. But has that objective been fulfilled? 3 years down the line, as the BBI train continues to move, are we headed in the right direction? Will the country get to its destination as promised by the BBI initiative? That is what we want to really dissect on this conversation. And once again, we'll invite you to be part of it at KBC Channel 1 and at Serfine_Achieng. Now joining us on set, Lydia, thank you so much for creating time. Lydia Mathia is a political strategist. Lydia, we had just started to open up this conversation and explore this anniversary that you're marking today as a country, probably as your opening remarks as well. You can take us back and tell us from where you sit, whether this was the dose that came at the right time to heal the country and actually bring down the pain where it was at that particular time, the handshake and what birthed the Building Bridges initiative. What do you think?
Definitely the handshake was very timely because we had deteriorated into a space where there were people in this country that felt that they didn't belong. They were starting to talk about splitting Kenya into 2. I think there were some maps going around that, let's have you govern that part of the country, let's have this other part of the country to ourselves. You recall the repeat elections. IBC was never able to execute elections in certain parts of this country. And so the fact we could not proceed that way, and something had to be done to create some sense of calm so that development could happen. Remember, Nairobi was inhabitable. I think twice a week we could not have business going on. People would not be able to come to their offices. They're not able to open their shops and trade. And therefore, I think we have to be very grateful for the leadership that was shown at that time, especially by His Excellency the President, in looking at the situation and saying, you know what, I have won these elections, but this country is bigger than me, it's bigger than my win, it's bigger than my party. Let me see what I can do to calm things down. And so I think we have to be grateful for his leadership and the magnanimity that he extended to the former Prime Minister. And also for the Prime Minister, you know, he had very agitated followers, you know, behind him, and who wanted to just, you know, push him to demand and call for, swearing in and to have two presidents and those kinds of things. But he too was able to show leadership to his followers and say, you know what, it's time to come together and build this country. So it was definitely very timely.
I want us to look at, two issues, and you'll help me understand how the handshake actually depicted this. And Job, I'll start with you. What did it teach us about the power that our political leaders carry? You know, just having, there were very strong political enemies, if you may ask me, going by what even happened in 2017, the boycott of the general election. You saw a big section of the country boycotting the second round of the presidential election. And this actually just tells you how massive the rivalry was between these two political leaders. For them to come together and actually have that sitting, what does it teach us about the power that they carry and what leaders can be able to do in this country?
Now, if you go back to the results of the election that was disputed and which was actually annulled by the Supreme Court, the two leaders almost had equal share of the vote. The difference was probably a million plus. A million plus in a voting of 14 or so million is basically nothing. So they each had like half the country to themselves. And the elections were such that it was two horses. So it was either you are with this side or the other side. And our people, the Kenyan nation, we really, really follow our leaders from what you see. Because once Raila called his troops to Uhuru Park for the swearing in, they all turned up. When the president called his troops to Kasarani for his inauguration, they turned up. And from that point, there was actually a division. And even in some of the places, like here in Nairobi, you'll find the two political sides identified, whether by tribe or ideology or whatever it is. People are not talking, people are enemies. But when they shook hands, it was over. It was all over, and people could move, and there was actually a big, if it was a balloon, the balloon was busted, and people were now relieved. So the two principals, the president and the prime minister, carry a lot of weight, and they have what I'll call fanatical supporters. And that's one of the things that we should realize as a nation. And anybody trying to get into the way of either the president or the prime minister and this handshake should know that it takes one word from either of them or two words from both of them to take us back to where we were in 2018, and it will be so bad.
That's exactly what I'm concerned about, because for this to be sustained in the long run, personally I feel like it should go beyond that intention, that spirit of the handshake should go beyond Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga. Do we have that right now? Or it is still centered along, you know, the agreement that these two gentlemen had in 2018? What's your feeling, Lydia?
It's, you know, it's a peculiar reality. It's not even just in Kenya. It's, you'll see it across Africa, and I think you've begun to even see it in the homeland of democracy, where Trump has emerged as a, larger than the Republican Party, which is an institution and has been an institution, but somehow has managed to elevate himself because of the fanatical following that he has been able to cultivate in the US. And so in this country, that's what you see. And for us, it's not new. It's been there. That's how our politics has played out. We have slowly tried to transit to institutional politics where maybe it's about party. And I think at some moment in history, there's a point where we had TNA and ODM, we had the Jubilee Coalition, and we had the NASA and the CORD Coalition. There was beginning to shape up some kind of institutional foundation to political discourse. But I think that had again decimated around the 2017 elections, where again we reconverged around the personalities. What I think the two principles can help us going forward is to try and recall and bring back that sense of institutional politics, so that we have even if those arrangements are based on whatever principles, whether it's tribe, whether it's economic interest, or whatever they are, if they could be based on institutions. Because when it's individuals, then you are sort of at their whims. You had, I think it's Otiende Omolo the other day, speaking and saying, that handshake stopped us from being in the streets. But it will just be like this, and we go back to those same streets,
Exactly.
and that's very, very risky. So I think it behoves the leaders of this country, to whom Kenyans have ceded so much authority and so much power, to be responsible with that power, to be responsible with that affirmation that Kenyans have given them, and see how they can steer the country, because they can steer us towards a more institutional foundation to our politics.
I'll ask the same question just to get your response, Job. Centering this between the two gentlemen, how dangerous is that for our country, considering the fact that President Uhuru Kenyatta, his term is coming to an end in 2022. Probably we do not know his political plans, but according to what we know, in 2022, he will not have that powerful position. Raila Odinga has not declared where he's going in 2022, but in the event they are not there, then what happens now that the handshake is centered between the two of them?
Yes.
Where does that leave us?
Serfine, historically, it had to be centered on them, because they were the principal antagonists, if I may use that word. And they were the people who were leading the two formations that were fighting for the presidency, if you leave the other three, court and the rest. So it had to start from somewhere. And usually when I get asked why had it to be the two, it was because they were the ones who were actually on the forefront on this. So when that moved, when they took that initiative and said, let's shake hands, let's now try to see what can we do to make this country more prosperous. One of the things that we're talking about that brings that identity, politics, be it whatever identity, but in Kenya primarily tribe, is resources. Yeah, people in this country, and it has been proven that when you are in power, you actually almost have the wherewithal to appropriate resources the way you want and the way you wish, despite what the Constitution says. And it's good that the 2010 gave us this devolution, but still the person who holds the executive at the center still has 85% of our resources. So this fight for resources has been actually the bane of our politics. And people will group in whichever way so that one of their own takes power. But going forward, I like what the two principals said. They said that we have problems. And one of the problems is inclusivity. We must be all included. It's beyond them. Them, they could have been the titular heads, and that time sort of even titular, just the real heads of the nation. But going forward, let everybody feel that if President Uhuru has been elected the president, he is the president of the whole republic. If whoever gets the presidency in 2022 is elected president, he or she should be the president of the whole republic. That's one of the things that we need to inculcate as we go forward. And those are some of the things that they mentioned in their 9-point agenda. And when the task force moved around, some of the things that Kenyans want to solve. So it lies in how we define our politics, how we appropriate resources, how we identify ourselves as our tribes, but knowing that Kenya is bigger than all of us. What kind of values and ethos do we espouse as a nation? And how do we treat all the various demographics that we have in the country, be it youth, women, people with disability, men, and the rest? How do they get treated in this nation called Kenya? Now, if all those are defined properly on some document, that's a contract between us, who are the people, and those who govern us, then we have a chance of actually now defining how we can move going forward. And I think that's why some of these reforms became critical. And that's also why constitutional reforms became very, very necessary in all this BBI process.
Okay.
And that's where we are.
Yeah, that's where we are. I don't know how you think, Lydia, this handshake should have been designed, in the sense that, yes, he's talked about inclusion, achieving inclusivity. One of the strategies also include, you know, the proposal to expand the executive so that we can have a representation of a bigger representation of the country in the top leadership. But can we be able to accommodate all communities at that level? If not, then how then do we ensure that that sense of nationhood, like that Job is talking about, is trickled down to the person who is in the remotest part of this particular country, so that it wouldn't matter whether somebody from my community is at the top, I would still feel like I'm benefiting from this government. How do we balance that particular you know, arrangement, so that when we're talking about inclusivity, it's genuine?
I really like how you frame that question. The issue of representation is so critical in politics. And like he's talked about, that's been the problem that we've been having. When you have a president at the top and a deputy president, people just see two people and they don't see themselves. They don't see themselves up there. So they feel, you know, we are not part of this thing. Those are just Kalenjins in serikali ya Wakalenjin na Wakikuyu. We are not in it. And so you have a huge chunk of Kenyans who feel excluded. And those feelings of exclusion are what then aggravate, you know, the political discourse every time we are having it. And so I think the move to, first of all, expand the executive, that's a very good move, because then more than 2 people, you will have 5 people. And those 5 people will have to come from all kinds of backgrounds. They will have to come from different tribes. They will have to come from different genders. They might have to come from different generations, so that when people see those 5 national leaders, they immediately feel themselves represented at that level.
But now, still, when you look at our multifaceted society,
of course we have more tribes. So we go, when you step it down,
accommodate everyone? When
you step it down and you look now at cabinet, right? We have to be a little bit more systematic with how we have our cabinet secretaries. I think when the 2013 elections happened and there was that, you know, those appointments that were done, I think one side of the divide, you know, side of the coalition did not bring on board, you know, a large, stakeholdership of the cabinet secretaries. I think we saw all of them coming from one region. One side tried to balance. And I think at the cabinet level, there is room to include now the other communities that will not be part of the first 5. So if even, and I think this is something that it is not written in the BBI, but one of the things that people are pushing for is to say that none of the cabinet secretaries should come from the same background, first of all, as the first 5, and then they shouldn't come from the same tribe as principal secretaries. So if you distribute that way, it means that every time there's a cabinet meeting that will comprise the president, the deputy, the prime minister, and the 2 deputies, and then the ministers, every single community in this country is seated on that table making decisions on behalf of this country. If we can be that open-ended and open-hearted to all of ourselves to sit on the table, then we'll have that inclusion you're talking about, where every large and small community is really included in governance.
That depends on whether the BBI process is going to get to its destination and whether some of these proposals are going to be implemented. And I'd just like us to now explore and just look at the direction this is taking. And let's be honest about this. 3 years on, we've seen what has been happening in the last few days in the political space.
Yeah.
I'll go back to where we began this conversation. What is the status of the handshake, Job?
The handshake is good when you talk about the handshake. But, you know, we are approaching 2022. Unfortunately, the handshake is getting caught up with 2022. In my view, the corona pandemic slowed down some of the things that were supposed to happen sooner than they are happening. For instance, this referendum should have happened last year. But now we are caught up with a referendum about probably will happen in June, wherever the courts finish with those matters. It will be like 1 year to the elections. So this muddles everything up. So time is actually the issue. So there are people who are still believing in what the 2 principles agreed on, and that process of handshake and BBI. There are others who are actually on the campaign trail, seeking 2022. In fact, if you remember, the moment that the president and the prime minister shook hands, the deputy president took a different tangent, and he has been busy campaigning about 2022. And now he's joined by more. There are more people who feel time is moving. We need to, even on the side of the president, on his part of Jubilee, and on the side of the Prime Minister on his part of ODM. There are people who are saying that time is moving. Mr. Prime Minister, the elections are next year. You have not moved. Your party is not moving. You are still busy shaking hands with the president. And the people of the president say, my friend, you want to leave a legacy in 2022. You still have not formally moved and identified who is going to take care of your interests. So there are jitters in both camps. But be that as it may, in my view, I still think that the two principals themselves, they are still glued to that handshake. They know what is at stake to them. It will be so embarrassing to the president and the prime minister if this was to be stillborn. Remember, they have been fighting off the DP. And even initially, people like Musali and Wetangula and Kalonzo, they initially saying, what is all this? Why are you people wasting time? Now, if this thing was to become stillborn, it would be so embarrassing to them. So I think they are on the right path. They are trying to have something going. But they have to rein in on their allies, close allies, and even those who are antagonizing them, so that they separate 2022 from the BBI. But they still allow those who want to run for 2022, because it's 1 year to the election. You cannot stop people now talking about 2022.
Exactly.
It's not possible.
About to ask you
yes, it's just not possible. Some people must move on to 2022.
Because we know that's the ideal, though. Yeah, that's what should happen. We sort of need to de-link BBI and 2022 general election. But several political pundits I've had on this show have told me changing the constitution is a political process in as much as it is a legal process. So, you know, separating issues and making these two independent processes may be a tall order. But, you know, that is a subject for another day. But, you know, Lydia, I don't know whether from your lenses, like what Job is describing, the grip is still tight. The handshake is still firm. What do you think? Just look at what the dynamics that have shaped the political space in the recent days. Is it still a firm handshake?
So for me, this handshake between Raila and Ruto, and Raila and Uhuru, reminds me of the partnership between Uhuru and Ruto. And every time there would be an issue, every time Ruto's people would say something, or people of the Uhuru would say something, people would be like, just relax. Ruto and Uhuru are like this. There is nothing that can happen to this partnership because they are very, very tight. You understand?
I didn't even see that coming.
No,
but go on.
That always used to be
this is interesting.
That always used to be the feedback, right? So now here we are again. There is Raila, there is Uhuru. There are people who have started to make noise. And remember, these people don't talk out of nowhere. There's some conversation that has happened over some drink somewhere at night that has created some agitation, right? And these people are coming out now to say publicly, Apanas, there's a problem, remove that kid picture from there. So then people are telling us, like he's saying, and I would say the same thing, that, you know, it's okay. The partnership is between Raila and Uhuru. That partnership is solid. The friendship is tight. They're able to consult and calm their forces. But this is what I worry about, is that those forces are behind them, those foot soldiers, those voices that whisper in their ears in the middle of the night, those people with whom they share that bottle or glass of something in the evening, those people influence these leaders. And so when you hear that disquiet begin to emerge, do not underestimate it. And do not gloss over whatever issues they are raising. And this is a lesson that perhaps the Uhuru side must have learned, that do not take these things at face value. Reach out, find out what is it that these people are disgruntled about. And if you're really interested in the survival of this partnership, then you must invest in building real bridges between the two of you. You must cede ground. You must accommodate the interest that Junet is talking about, the interest that Otiende is talking about, the interest that Orengo is trying to, articulate in obscure language. Find out what really is the interest and see how you can accommodate that interest within the partnership, so that you do not gloss over it and say, Raila ataongea na watu wake, ama Uhuru ataongea na watu wake. You'll find yourself in trouble. And then you'll be taking us backwards, and then BBI will be stillborn. So the actors on both sides have a responsibility, and I think Uhuru's side has an even bigger responsibility because he is the president, he is the one who has to be magnanimous, to indulge, because he's the one with the state resources, the one with the state power. His people are the ones with the levers of state. So they are the ones to indulge the other side of the handshake, where the mumbling is coming from. It's important that they close ranks and indulge the interests of the side of Raila Odinga.
So something is going on, something that cannot be ignored. That is what you're saying? That
is my feeling, because it's not every day that you see Otiende speak in that manner. He's a fairly sober leader. I don't think we have seen him, throw that kind of rhetoric around. When Junet comes out to speak, he's usually articulating a very strong policy position that the Prime Minister has probably spoken about in private. When you see somebody like Orengo come out in a public rally to speak the way he spoke, these are not small people. This is not Babu, or I don't know who. These
Please don't do that.
You understand?
Lydia, these are very,
I'm very sorry, but these are very serious leaders.
Please stop right there.
These are not, you can't take them lightly.
So Job, that is not enough to make the handshake wobble, what Lydia is describing?
To me, not enough,
really?
but it can cause certain issues which were planned for post-handshake. There's supposed to be political arrangements happening after the handshake, after the BBI. Sorry. The BBI was supposed to deliver all these institutional and constitutional and legal administrative reforms that we need as a country to solve some of the things that the President and the Prime Minister through their task force identified. But thereafter, there was supposed to be an election. Everybody knows there's supposed to be an election. Like I said, these BBI constitutional reforms were supposed to happen last year. The pandemic pushed it to this year. Now it's congregating with the elections. And now we cannot stop people talking about the elections. It's not possible, because a party needs to popularize itself. And even ODM itself realized that time is running out. Remember ODM early this year, a few weeks ago, started looking for people who want to become president and the rest. They started reorganizing themselves. Jubilee also doing the same. UDA, the same. All these parties have to start now moving towards 2022. Now, how the two leaders shape the conversation about the BBI and the conversation about 2022 will be very critical in determining how we move. But at this point, it's too late for them to say, don't talk about 2022. In fact, now it's a fallacy. I will advise the principals, if they are listening, that let their 2022 plans now proceed, as well as the BBI constitutional reforms. Because it's not possible now to stop anybody discussing it unless they want elections in 2024. But if the elections are going to happen in 2022 August,
it has to be now.
It has to be now. The parties must organize, the parties must start strategizing, people must start identifying which parties they want to be in, and now it is that process where they have to now put their politics in sync. They were in sync when it comes to reforms. People thought that they were going to be in sync post the reforms and be in one coalition as they move to 2022. Now is the time that the principals must talk. And if they were planning to be together after the BBI, they need to be together now. They should not wait for July or wherever. They have to tell their people that our plan was after the BBI has passed, the president's part of Jubilee and Raila's part of NASA who are going to form some form of coalition moving forward. The more they delay that, the more they're allowing these mandarins within the civil service that the audience is talking about, and the other political players who are Johnny come lately into this thing, the Sacred Alliance and the rest, time to, one, scuttle the BBI, and two, to stifle ODM and stifle Jubilee, the President's Jubilee, from now talking about power in 2022. And that will scuttle everything. So they have to come out and say...
Let the cat out of the bag.
Yes, let politics move on. And this is what we want politically now, talking about our politics. This is what we are aiming for. We are aiming for a coalition, or we are not going to form anything after the referendum. ODM should go its way, and as we are going our way, so that everybody knows, and then expectations are met and people can start planning.
Looking at the level of adrenaline that comes with our politics, and to some extremes also we've seen it get toxic, how dangerous is that for us to bring BBI and 2022 politics together in one table and let's deal with these two issues as we go along? How risky is that for us? Because you're talking about reforms that will last years and will shape the generations to come. Bringing in the politics and dealing with these two issues, knowing very well that they may just impact each other. How risky is that for us?
So for me, two things. The combination of BBI and 2022 is unhealthy. That's unhealthy, whichever way you look at it. for the reason that you are very ably articulate, that the BBI is for posterity, 2022 is short-term 5-year, interest. And so the handshake leaders are right to try to separate. They're right to try to separate. Whether it's practically possible because of the timing issue is another conversation. But I think they have to try and remain faithful. What I think is the rain that is starting to beat the situation is that there are people on either side who are not either Raila or Uhuru, trying to be clever and say, even though our agreement is to keep 2022 out of this, our BBI thing, they're trying to play some cards under the table, and pull a first one and try to get away with it, a move that helps them with 2022, and see if they can get away with it without the other side noticing. And that's what you had ODM complaining about, for example, in Matungu. And they're like, the moves you're making in Matungu to try and reinforce the stature, the political stature of Mudavadi and ANC in Western, you're doing that for purposes of your maneuvering post-BBI for 2022. So stop that. If it's BBI, it's BBI. Or if we are dealing 2022, we deal 2022. So I think people behind the scenes need to stop trying to pull, those cards below the table, or pass a quick one, without the other person noticing. They need to be trying. And if they don't, if they cannot be genuine,
politicians are busy people, and they fail to notice.
They can't fail to. You understand? These are clever people. There's no you're going to pull a stunt like that, and they don't notice. They'll be like, how are you allowing ANC mandarins to run roughshod on an election, and security officers are just there watching? Like, how can we assume that you had nothing to? How are we supposed to believe that you had nothing to do with it? You understand? So that's the problem. Both sides need to be sincere. Either we are separating BBI in 2022, or if we are doing this thing together, like he's saying, then let's do it together. And we say, let's bring out what the plan is for post-2022. Otherwise, don't try to maneuver for 2022 while you keep telling me that BBI is different from 2022.
Then where will this leave the critics? I'm calling them critics because we still do not have the no team.
Yeah.
Nobody has come out to say they are leading the no team, which will form part of our conversation as well. But the critics of the BBI initiative, who have in very many occasions termed this a strategy to create positions for certain individuals, assuming that plan is brought on the table and the coalition is formed and they say, okay, fine, this is going to be our presidential flag bearer, this is going to deputize, this is going to be the prime minister, and this is going, and it happens to be the big five. Now, what message will they send, and how will this be interpreted, especially from those who have been really criticizing the BBI and saying, you see, these people are out to create positions for themselves. I mean, how will this play out, Job?
It's politics, Serfine. Now we have reached the political season, so it's politics. So it's a question of how to manage the politics. But the truth is that the expansion of the executive was not really to give jobs to the big boys. It was an attempt to bring inclusion. Yeah, just like we have said here a few minutes ago. People perceive the presidency, which was the president and the deputy, to belong to the two communities that they two come from. And expanding that to include 5 and even further, maybe the leader of opposition and the rest now in terms of governance, makes all people, if now include the cabinet plus the assistant ministers plus whatever else you can create, shows all the people that they are also having a stake in the government. So those who are criticizing that expansion on the sense that it was jobs for a few people were just playing politics. It was actually an attempt, and it's an attempt to bring inclusion.
But if a lineup is given now, how will it be interpreted the same way you're saying?
No, they may not have to say a lineup. In my view, if they cannot stick this thing out between the reforms and the 2020, which in my view they can't, it's too late now. People are strategizing for 2022. ODM wants to capture power. Jubilee wants to capture power. UDA has been campaigning since 2018. Wetangula and Mudavadi and Kalonzo and Gideon, they're on the move. You can see Gideon is moving every other 3 days. Something is going on, and no one is going to wait. So it's now upon the principals to just agree. Are they going to be in a political union post the reforms? At least they could make that statement to their teams. They should say that Jubilee of Uhuru and ODM of Raila are planning a political union after the BBI. They may just put it that way. That may calm down some of the people.
I like how you're saying Jubilee of Uhuru.
Yeah, because Jubilee has the Ruto one and the
Jubilee of Uhuru.
Yeah, Jubilee is in two sides. That one is given. Everyone knows that. The deputy is Jubilee and...
No, they are UDA. They are not Jubilee.
And the president's Jubilee. So they make that statement. Or they call their teams together. Nothing stops them from having a meeting somewhere. Yeah, where we have the Jubilee. Like, I remember during some of the BBI processes, Raila has been hosting Jubilee party leaders in Nairobi, at least, and the ODM ones. The president can do the same. He can call the Jubilee PG, ODM PG. They agree, they talk. They say, this is what we're looking after reform. So give us some time. Let's pass this thing. It's on 3 or so months. Let's pass this Katiba. Let's start the legislative processes of anchoring the rest of those bills required in the Katiba. But then we are going to explore that. Because at the moment, the problem with people in the ODM side is they don't know what's going to happen after the BBI. Maybe Raila will be dumped. Now, if you're dumped in July, this is 2021, how much time do you have till 28? You have lost a lot of capital the last 3 years. Raila used to be a mobilizer. If not the Raila of the old, every other week he'll be somewhere doing something. Now he has been somewhere doing BBI. Now this BBI has passed. And then now there is no political capital. Of course, there will be good things, reforms, legacy, and the rest. But ODM was not formed to create reforms for the country. ODM was formed to capture power.
I like how realistic you are.
So that must be on the table.
Okay, Job Lydia, let's take a very short break. We are coming back with much more, and still we invite you to be part of the conversation at KBC Channel 1 at Serfine_Achieng. Please tell us your thoughts as the handshake is marking 3 years since President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga shook hands. We are going to be taking a break. We are coming back with much more.
Fanya hivi, wewe teremuka tu chini. Hata watu wanangojea, unasema unione. Si ninakuona ndio huyu kucha. Kucha ninakuona.
Yoi.
Nimekuita mara ngapi Kate? This is the Nissan Note.
Hii ndio motoka.
Not that this is the Nissan Note we are giving out.
Na ni rahisi sana kuwekelea bid. Unaenda kwenye lipa na M-Pesa. Unaweka paybill number 4032353. Kisha unakelea account number ya Nissan Note ni Note, N-O-T-E. Namba ambayo unapenda, labda unapenda 100, labda unapenda 200. Wekelea Note 100, Note 200. Alafu tutakuitisha shilingi 40 peke yake, 40 bob only. Weka pin yako, utakuwa umekelea bid ya hii Nissan Note. Inakungoja wewe mahali popote ulipo. Mimi na mtumishi tutakupea.
Tonight on KBC Channel 1.
Today is such an auspicious day. You won't understand a mother's emotion.
Ashok and Dharma have taken away the peace of this palace.
Tonight on KBC Channel 1.
I'm actually very grateful to Cesar for what he did for me and for my daughter. If he hadn't risked his life to protect Valeria, I don't know what would have happened.
And how about Valeria? Is she all right? Is she out of danger?
Could it be a coincidence? Or are you here with a purpose? You are in the lives of Mauro, Max, and Cesar. Why weren't you the one whom the flames reached?
You just take it easy. calm down. Relax, okay? Everything's going to be all right.
What's this? Huh?
What?
What is he doing here?
Welcome back, and thank you so much for staying with us. Today is the 9th of March 2021, 3 years since the handshake, and that is our discussion this morning. We still invite you to interact with us. Plus, also, we are following up on some of events that are happening in Kenya, and right now we want to cross over to Kisumu County. We know that there is the COVID-19 vaccine that is currently being distributed nationwide, and this particular morning, Kisumu County, there was the unveiling of the COVID-19 vaccine, and it's an event that is currently underway at the Jaramogi Oginga Odinga Teaching and Referral Hospital. Let's just listen into what is happening.
The CCM for Health and Sanitation. At this juncture then, I would wish that I request the other members to just be on their seat, and then I would request that as I give the mic to my colleague, Professor Nyunya, and the director and the other team members, then you'll be able to be led to the stages on how the vaccine is done, and preferably you'll get your jab at this juncture. So, karibuni sana. Na natumai ya kwamba sote tumefurahia pamoja na tuko tayari kuweza kujizuia na kujikinga kutokana na maradhi ya corona virus. Asante sana, karibu Ongwara. Another announcement, the vehicle number KCN 289S. If at all you have the vehicle KCN 289S, kindly be by your vehicle so that you can be guided accordingly. Asante sana.
Asante sana, Joel Abongo. Our chief guest, we are coming to the...
In Kisumu County, that function that is currently underway is the unveiling of the COVID-19 vaccine in Kisumu County. Healthcare workers are among the people who are being prioritized to be among the first people to get the jab. So what is happening in the country right now is sort of an awareness process with regards to this COVID-19 vaccine, and a process to take our healthcare workers and all those people who've been listed as the priority group for this vaccine are going to be receiving the jab in the next few weeks. We will be getting back to that particular function later. But in studio, we've been talking about the handshake anniversary. And ladies and gentlemen, before we took the break and even took the particular link, an interesting conversation had begun picking up here in studio, just talking about how we cannot stay away from the 2022 conversation. This is the elephant in the room that has to be addressed now. But it's coming at a time when we are also dealing with the reforms and changing the constitution and leading this country to a new direction. So giving us a very tricky balance of trade here as a country, because we know how toxic our politics can get. But then I'd just like to understand at this particular juncture also, how then do we, trade? How then do we reach a compromise? How then do we come up with a formula that will not hurt Wanjiku, it will not block Wanjiku from benefiting from this whole process that is meant to bring solutions to the challenges that the country is facing? Job, I'll start with you, and then I'll also get to Lydia, because we've all agreed we cannot stay away from 2022. But we need to really not let the promises that the BBI initiative have go just like that because of the politics. How do we balance? How do we reach a balance?
I think the first thing is for the principals to rein in on their troops. Let me use our troops. They retrace the journey. They remind everybody of the direction that they wanted to go. That direction included constitutional reforms. It included legislative matters. It included policy and admin issues that need to be sorted out, because we have issues. they laid out 9 issues, and Kenyans helped them dissect these 9 issues, which now came into BBI 1 and then BBI 2, which now is in Parliament. So that needs to go on. The second thing is that they need to be honest with themselves. Just like I said earlier, they need to be honest with themselves and to know that political parties are formed to capture power. Now, once they have agreed on a framework, they need to agree now. This should not be an assumption, should not be stated by other people. It should be an agreement between the two.
It should be clear from them.
Yes,
they
from them.
Should be the ones
that
passing the message.
I know you are ODM, you're a political player. I know you're a Jubilee, a political player. Now, how do you want to play out now based on the fact that there is other competition which is now moving? Because all these issues we know have been created by the fact that the political competition is now moving very fast. And some of this political competition comes from within the coalitions that these two principals had just at the time of the handshake. Raila was in NASA, Uhuru was in Jubilee. Yeah, UDA is moving, which is principally part of Jubilee. NASA had Musalia and the rest. They are moving, and they are part of NASA. So when these people move around, and then when there are rumors, innuendos, and maybe facts that they're being supported by people within the civil service, as alleged by Orengo and the rest. And these same people in the civil service, at one point, were at the disposal of the BBI team. Because the truth is that that core team of the civil service, the BBI, was actually, in government, it was almost being run by Matiang'i's office on the government side, as part of his coordination of government or whatever. He was initially, if you looked at how BBI 1 came about and the rest, that funding was actually coming through him to the task force, from what I can gather from what's publicly available. So that part of government, civil service, is very key to the BBI, or it has been key that moment. So the only difference is the politics that they want to play. Is it politics that benefits the principles of the BBI, or it is politics that benefits people who did not consider the BBI? Because if the BBI brought this space where we have peace, the economy is growing, there's goodwill, and then somebody within the same structure attempts to hijack that and gives the benefits of that to one who, in the initial stages, was actually anti-BBI. The truth is that Mudavadi, Kalonzo, Wetangula, Ruto were all anti-BBI.
But there was room for national discourse.
Yes, they were all anti-BBI when it started.
Yeah,
yes,
we agree.
Yes. So they are late into the train. So they should not appear to be in a hurry to reap from it more than the two principles of the BBI. No, surely they should. No, that's the politics.
I don't know, but it's not upon me to disagree or agree.
That's
but
politics.
Lydia, what do you think?
I think
you may have opposed the BBI, but somewhere along the line, because of national discourse, because of public participation, I mean, was there not room for changing your mind and making a U-turn?
I think there was. There was definitely room. I think one of the greatest U-turns we have seen is, I think, the governor of Makueni, who's done, like the people have said, so me, I don't know. Then there's also this other fellow from Kiambu, former governor Kabogo. So you've seen some U-turns, and I think U-turns are acceptable. But let me tell you, I do agree. So first of all, yes, you cannot keep political actors from politicizing BBI, because they also want to use the platform to rebuild their image, to reconnect with the people, to improve their prospects for re-election in 2022. Others want to use the platform to emerge as new leaders and candidates for 2022. So that is going to continue to happen. 3 actors must remain above that fray if BBI is to survive and not be stillborn. One is the president. He has to remain above the fray. He cannot get into a conversation about 2022. It will torpedo BBI straight away. The second actor is the former prime minister. He cannot be the one connecting BBI and 2022. If he's playing his politics, let those politics be played through ODM. Let him advance his political organizing, his outreach to allies and his outreach to communities and stakeholders and groups of youth and women. Let that be advanced through the political wing. That is ODM that he leads, and that is okay. But he must remain above the fray where BBI is concerned. The other third actor is the government of Kenya and its machinery. The provincial administration, the commissioners, ministries, interior, the police, they must be seen to be above the fray on this conversation of BBI. They cannot be seen to be trying to create some kind of future for 2022 on some political actors right now. Fine, there are some people in those offices, of course those offices like NSIS and Ministry of Interior, they also try to what is called statecraft. They try to statecraft the future of the country, and they try to bring up people who could be potential leaders and support them and whatnot. But if I was to give advice unsolicited, hold on that until BBI is secure, until BBI is home and dry. We've got it. The bill is signed by the president. Once that is done, go back and do your statecraft machinations. Or if you try to do it now, make sure you're not caught trying to do it. Those three actors must be seen, even if they are not truly, they must be seen to be above the fray, and they must, because they're the ones who will keep BBI, the conversation a little bit sane, so that it's not completely overcome by the 2022 politics that are beginning, of course, to emerge, and which you cannot stop. Yeah.
They should make sure they're not caught.
Yeah, they should make sure they're not caught. Just do it and don't be seen.
But, Job, do you think when the two gentlemen entered this gentleman's agreement, did they invest in also marshalling their allies into this handshake? Did they invest in actually making sure that as I'm speaking this language, my team is also speaking this language together with me, reading from what is happening?
Yes, you've heard from various BBI meetings how the president reached out to his deputy, who even went ahead and appointed 3 commissioners of that task force. Raila has also said how he called Kalonzo and he didn't get him, and then he got Mudavadi. And then I remember very well after the handshake, there was a meeting in Manzoni Lodge, the NASA team, they're all there and they talked about it. So they reached out to these people. But the BBI had always been dogged by 2022 from that point, whereas the principals that time were saying that we were crafting this thing for posterity and the rest. Those who had political ambitions were saying, no, this must be a tool by yourself and Raila to craft a 2022 team. That time it was not genuine, yeah, because we had a lot of time. In fact, this BBI, had it not been for, let me say, for quite some time, there were people who were anti-BBI within the statecraft. Let me use that word. That's why the BBI really delayed. This thing was supposed to have been over, in my view, by 2019. It will have been over, it will have been done. That task force will have been done. No, 2019, before even COVID.
Oh, okay.
Yes, but there were people who were still playing karata with it. Let's just keep Raila happy and the economy moves. Yeah, this may happen or not happen. But then they realized the president was serious. When they realized the president was serious, COVID came in. Yeah, now we are caught up with time. So those actors who looked at this as 2022 were skeptical. So even when they were being brought on board, they were saying, no. That's why the deputy president bolted. He was anti-BBI from word. These other people they are here, not there. And the two principals went. In fact, at some point, Raila carried so much of this weight on the BBI just before actually COVID came. Yeah. So the people just need to wait. At the moment, we are waiting for a referendum. Parliament will do its work, whatever they do, we'll go to a referendum. The people just need to look at what's good in this thing, and to me, there's a lot of good in it. If we pass this BBI, then we move on. But I still repeat, we are time barred. If I was actually a member and a leading member of a political party, I will not stop talking about 2022. Because you need more than 1 year if you are a party who's seriously looking for power to strategize. So at what point will you go to Kwale and do a BBI meeting, and then when do you go back and do an ODM meeting? At what point will you go to Sagana and do a BBI meeting, and then you want to go back and do a Jubilee meeting? The timelines are becoming very tight. these two principals just need to openly now discuss their 2022 plan. They may not have to make it public, but they have to tell their troops, like we were discussing in the background, tell their troops this is our plan. After 2022, Jubilee will be moving on its own. I'm not going to discuss in the ODM. Or after 2022, again, we're moving its own. I'm not going to discuss about Jubilee. So that they know as they move towards the referendum. Because other than, if they don't do that, then this BBI will, by default, be sacked in 2022 matters, and chances are that, depending on how things are moving, we may be in trouble. Yes.
Let me bring in the Deputy President. Lydia, I don't know what you interpret from how he has been handling this whole BBI initiative. His messaging, he's coming out to say he's not comfortable with 1, 2, 3 things. How he has gone about this whole process, how do you interpret that, based on the fact that we are all talking about these key players being very strategic about how they go about this process? How do you interpret his game plan with the BBI initiative?
When you see the Deputy President and then you hear what the President says about the fact that he was on board from the beginning, there is a sense you get that he did not want to come to the BBI as a package with Uhuru. He didn't want to come into this handshake conversation as a package. You know, Uhuru would have come and say, Mimi, niko na nani, na nani, na nani. So these ones are taken care of. The same way Kalonzo and Mudavadi said, hey, even as we are not coming with Raila as a package, yes, we want our own identity, mtuongeleshe, direct, you know.
We are our own
people, so I think there's a sense in which that's one of the things that, because he wants to get swallowed in that, because if he was beneath or underneath or behind Uhuru, then the other principle is Raila. So you can imagine the contenders are just those two, and then he doesn't have his own identity, and he could see the way this thing was going to go. It was going to shape, in some sense, the political discourse going into the next election, and he wanted to have his own identity. So there's that first fact. The second fact is that he is opposed to BBI, because his people have told us that the concern, one of the concerns of why there are concerns on his side, perhaps with his people, maybe not him, is that you're going to reduce the national government's budget from 85% to 65%. So there's like, hey, you governed with 85%, me, you want me to govern with 65%. Why? Then you want me to share power with Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister. There is a whole parliamentary, strength that comes with this Prime Minister. So there's a sense, of course, he feels that his presidency, if he was to get it, would be watered down. So that's part of some of the, in-house things that he doesn't say, that some of his people talk about in terms of why they are opposed to the BBI. But more other people say, well, he'll also use the BBI to also coalesce a coalition around him, so he can have better prospects for 2022. He will need those 5 positions, actually, even more than Uhuru or Raila would need those 5 positions to sort of converge a coalition that has the potential to take power in 2022. So there is that. Now, the final thing why he will not come out clearly that he's actually opposed is because he doesn't want to spend money. He doesn't want to use his budget for the 2022 campaigns on this BBI, because he can see if it passes, he will have his cake and still eat it. You understand? He'll have had his identity, and he will still use those 5 positions to campaign. He'll still use the World Development Fund to campaign. So it will still work out for him if it passes, right? But if he comes out to oppose it for it not to pass, he will have to spend money in competition with the state which automatically comes with employees, vehicles, resources, a broadcast company such as KBC. I mean, there is so much that he would need to outlay money-wise to oppose or to come heads-on against, the principles of the BBI, that it's just not worth it. He will run out of steam, he will run out of money, and there's no guarantee that he will actually be able to win. Otherwise, if he knew that he could have the kind of resource that he needed to push back on the state and push back on the infrastructure that is there for BBI, he probably would attempt, because it would profile him higher than these two principals, but he won't take that chance. It's too risky. It will cost him too much, and he just doesn't have, I think, the level of outlay of cash that you would need to do both BBI, no BBI campaign and the 2022 campaign.
I like how you have articulated that. Job, I also want to hear your own version of how you interpret this. You know,
DP's stance.
Yes, how he has been, his messaging, and even what he does when it comes to touching that BBI button. How do you interpret it, and why he's inspired to do what he does?
He is opposing it, and he's clever about it. If you watch his events, he'll say one or two lines about the BBI, which on the face value does not seem like opposing, but he has let 30 people before him oppose it. In fact, that's one aspect of the DP's political posturing, which he needs to improve on. It comes out so badly. When you have 30 people before you say, this thing is mbaya, this thing is whatever, then you come and say, you know what, you start saying as if you didn't hear what they say. So he is opposing the BBI. But like the leader said, it's difficult for him to oppose it directly because he's going to be the biggest beneficiary of BBI. Amongst these top players, where the top players at the moment is Uhuru, Ruto and Raila, tier 1, and then the rest is tier 2. Ruto has the biggest problem of forming coalitions. His politics are such that he doesn't seem like he wants to sit on the same table with people as equals. He always likes being the boss. And that makes, in this tribal and regional nature of our politics, that makes it very difficult for him to get friends. So if this thing passes, he'll be the biggest beneficiary because he'll automatically and by default get an opportunity to have 4 friends who will not come because they love him. They come because there are positions that they can occupy despite whatever relationship they have with the DP. So that's why whether the thing passes or not, he's okay. He's okay on that sense because it will give him more leverage. On the other hand, he will like the whole state machine. Most of these politicians like the whole 85% and being the boss and everything. Yeah, that is before the BBI. So his messaging is very clear. Let the people oppose. In fact, he had hoped the MCAs was going to oppose this. The president and Raila were cleverer than him on that. Now he's really praying that the people, for some reason or the other, oppose. In fact, that's why you'll find that several people went to court. And some of these people went to court at some point affiliated with him, and he's then perceived no campaign to try to derail this thing as much as possible.
We're talking about the no campaign now that you brought that up. There's been this question of who will lead a no campaign. Why should we even be asking that question? I mean, especially coming from the BBI proponents. They've already carried the day. Why are they interested in somebody to come and oppose?
There is a Linda Katiba group that even today they're going to issue some statements. Yeah, there is a group called Linda Katiba. They don't have, unfortunately, I know Martha will feel so bad if I say this and she hears. They don't have a person with that gravitas to stand there as a politician and say, I'm leading it. So far now, it's only Martha who's there from the leading politicians saying no. So that will come a cropper. The church, unlike the 2010 where the church was very strong, the church this time is ambivalent. So they are missing the church, where the church means the whole religious body. They are missing a big politician to be on their side. So it's now left to some civil society groups saying they are leading the Katiba to try to say no. Yeah, but they're up against a very big machinery. Yeah, it will be difficult.
So currently there is no one to lead a no campaign?
You know, you will be torpedoed. I mean, the state is going to have you for breakfast, lunch, dinner. I mean, and no politician wants to have their security withdrawn. I don't know. You know, they also, you know, statecraft is a matter of soft deploying, yes, soft tactics, but also very hard tactics. So if you, for example, are an actor in the political space and maybe you even have a position in government, then, you know, and you've seen some of those things deployed. You've seen some of that hard power exercised on some of these people. And these are tools that are at the disposal always of the state. They can always deploy these tools that make you be like, hey, you know, it's okay, it's not worth it. Let me just be quiet. If it passes, it passes. It doesn't, it's okay. I'm not going to be the one to fall on my sword on a thing that actually doesn't hurt me in the long run, just to make a political point or create political relevance or stature. Let it be, and you'll not see a lot of these politicians really come out too strongly against BBI. I think in Mount Kenya we only have three politicians who are opposed against a huge whole force of MCAs and governors and all that. So it's very difficult when the state is really on one side and you hedge your bets against it.
On the other side. So is this a done deal then?
Well,
we are waiting for a referendum, so
if the handshake holds,
a yes or no.
Unless something goes wrong with the handshake and Raila withdraws his troops in Bunge from supporting BBI, that's the only thing that can stop us from going to a referendum.
That will stop reggae.
That can stop reggae. The other thing is the judiciary. I think the judiciary is being, and I say this with a lot of humility, I think they are being a little bit too liberal with the power that they hold. They need to come out clearly as soon as they can to tell us whether they are stopping BBI or not stopping BBI, because the uncertainty, you know, that they would create, let's say Parliament, finally, I think they've already published, so they will very soon, you know, go to Bunge and pass the thing. So we'll just all be sitting on our hands, waiting for the judiciary to determine the case that is before them. I think they have a responsibility to decide one way. Don't have that uncertainty, because Kenyans are not good with uncertainties. The amount of rhetoric that will emerge in you know, kind of like an information lacuna where it's not clear whether we are going forward or back. People start suspecting each other. I think I've seen something in the newspaper. No, I think it's Robert Alai's tweet. He said, saying that there's a scheme to use the judiciary, I don't know, to approve some things and then rule others unconstitutional or something.
So, you know, living out to make that, to block that from happening, something needs, a clear direction needs to be given. They need to give clear direction so that they also don't create room for a lot of suspicion and funny rhetoric, which we don't know. Again, you know, this country, people can really pivot into the wrong direction. So they need to come out clearly before Parliament finishes, or around the time the Parliament finishes with the business of the BBI. The judiciary must also have closed the matter and opened up for IBC to begin preparing, or shut it down so that we all know hakuna mali tunaenda. But they need to determine that case. All right. So let's now, you know, leave it at that. Let's wait. It's a wait and see the situation. But one of the things that the Building Bridges initiative sought to address, it has been a perennial problem. We began this conversation by talking about it, the issue of divisive elections. I know there are others that also are contained as part of the proposals to solve what is ailing Kenya, but the divisive elections is a hot button that has really taken us backwards in this country for centuries. I'd like to just get your quick reaction, going by what happened in the recent by-elections in Kabuchai, in Matungu, in Nakuru County, and the sort of skirmishes and the chaos that we witnessed after those by-elections. Would you confidently say that as a country we have gotten to that point where we are ready to put divisive elections in our past?
No, the Matungu, Kabuchai, London Ward, and the Kisii one, and the one in Naivasha, it was a very bad show for the Republic. And in fact, I'm disappointed by, first of all, Chebukati. I expect Chebukati to have issued a stronger statement than what he did, and condemned those who harassed his staff. Secondly, the politicians who moved even further. You know, before you'll find politicians fighting in a polling station. That's okay. They can beat each other up if they wish.
No, it's not okay.
No, it's their own issue. But when they move to tackling officers, elections officers, it's a very serious thing happening. In fact, I'm wondering who will want to be a clerk? In some of these places, no one will want to be a clerk unless a policeman is guarding you right there. Because if Chebukati and the DPP and the police allow what I saw in Matungu, where Malala frog marched election officials from their station and is walking around holding press conferences, if that is allowed to continue, it will be very sad. If what we saw in London, where police will come and disperse 1,000 people who had come to vote, and no one cared whether they came back to vote, is allowed to happen, that's very bad.
All right, but then how then do we interpret this based on our motive and our spirit of addressing the perennial issue of divisive elections? Are we ready for that? We want it, but are we ready for that? Just looking at what happened just recently, it's just the other day, we have not even moved far. Are we ready for peaceful elections in this country, tear gas-free elections?
What can guarantee elections that are peaceful is that the institutions entrusted with the management of elections must always be and be perceived to be above board. So maybe IBC, they were doing their job, but on the Matungu, London ward elections, there is no excusing the security forces and the level of laissez-faire attitude that they displayed when some of these things were happening. We must express a very strong sense of intolerance to political violence. It has to be so clear that you cannot do the things that we saw happen in Matungu and London and in those other places. It must be so clear that even you having the thought of doing that thing, it just makes you shudder because of how strongly the state institutions are supposed to react to you. If Chebukati, and I agree with him, when he saw his officer being fog-marched like this, the next thing is to just cancel that damn thing.
Exactly.
You know how that election stood, and there's a winner who is announced. It's a travesty of justice. It doesn't make any sense. And what it's also communicating to these adults, that conducted themselves in that manner, is that, oh, you can actually do this and get away with it. And when people get away with that level of impunity, you can bet they will repeat it. And so the challenge actually goes to the state institutions to be able to push back and express the intolerance we need to see against these acts of violence and these acts of impunity around elections, because people will always try. People will always try to suppress voter turnout, to suppress, the opponent's person from coming out, but everybody must stick within the law. So the law enforcement persons are the ones who really have the responsibility to make sure that we do not all act as if we are in the Plato age, with that age of, before the state, where everybody, the strong man wins and everybody is, everybody is in charge and nobody is in charge. So I was very disappointed. Personally, I was very, very disappointed with the security forces, whether they were acting or on their own behalf, on the behest of maybe the local leaders or any other leaders. That was a complete failure on their part. In fact, they must do something to redeem themselves. We must see action post that activity. If we have another by-election in whichever other place, let us see intolerance, that intolerance to political violence, because we cannot allow it to stand. It should not be allowed to stand.
All right. Allow me very quickly to just take our viewers to something that is happening in Mombasa County. We are coming back to pick up from there. In Mombasa County, at the Serova White Sands Hotel, the Senate leadership is holding a strategic meeting just to reflect on the fourth session and set their priorities for the coming fifth session. Currently speaking is Senator James Orengo. Let's just listen into what is going on.
I think there were moments when we thought the proceedings of the Senate and our work was going to be very partisan. And as one senator put it before, that it may be noisy and messy. But you have steered the ship confidently and with a degree of fairness. And the Senate is what it is today because of your committed leadership. The other thing that I wanted to note is that the Senate is the most democratic house of parliament, because as we sit here, the only people who have been in leadership continuously from the beginning is the Speaker and Senator Mutula Kilonzo and Senator Fatuma Dulu. Everybody else has come in over time. And that is commendable, because by the end of the tenure of 5 years, everybody, or a big number of senators, would have gotten into positions of leadership, including Senator Faki, who I think is wrongly describing himself as a hustler. A learned friend can never be a hustler. and you can't carry that tag into the court. And secondly, he's chairman of the Committee on Delegated Legislation, although an election is due, but I presume you're still the chairman. So you're a very distinguished senator who cannot be described in any other terms. Now, to come to this meeting, I think this meeting is coming at a very, very important period in the life of Parliament as a whole, and the Senate in particular. We have 18 months to do what we need to do as this particular House elected for a term of 5 years, and looking ahead at what is coming. I think, one, we got what it takes to answer to the agenda that we must deal with in the remaining period. And also, I think the spirit of unity and bipartisanship is going to make this possible. That does not mean that we cannot differ, and we have differed many times, but I want to commend the leadership and the senators that whenever those differences have occurred, after they've been concluded, we get back to that spirit of bipartisanship, which I think is important, especially when you're trying to deal with a transformative agenda as included in various pieces of legislation. Now, this country has never really accepted the fact that Parliament, we have a bicameral system of government, of Parliament. And what does that mean? That means that each house matters in every piece of legislation. And the courts have said as much in expressing their views and determining quite a number of issues which have gone before the courts, that Article 110, Sub-Article 3, speaks to the vital role of the Senate, so that any piece of legislation, whether the Senate debates or whether that bill is introduced in the Senate, through Article 110, Sub-Article 3, the Speaker will have played a role on behalf of the Senate in making that determination. And then at the end of the day, when the President assents to any bill, the product of the bill is not an act of the Senate or an act of the National Assembly, it is an act of the Parliament of Kenya. And I hope that in the fullness of time, we are going to accept our system of government and our legislation, or rather our legislature, that it speaks to a bicameral system of government. And that I'm saying because some people try to continue to emphasize the fact that, really our core responsibility is with devolution. Devolution is just one of the areas where the Senate is required to make interventions and to carry out work, not only in legislation, but on other issues dealing with devolution. I am looking forward to a very busy period with the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill coming into the Senate, and then the enabling legislation or implementing legislation or consequential legislation that is going to form part of the BBI process. And nothing has been changed in terms of the role of the Senate except its membership. And me, I'm very happy and comfortable about, the Senate being the only institution legally and constitutionally that is going to be fully gender compliant. And I think we should be proud of it. And now the possibility of having a leadership that is totally, led by one gender as against the other, or the numbers tilting towards one gender or another. I think that is going to be raised in the next Senate. And therefore, I'm trying to encourage the other senators who may think that that is a weakening or a emasculation of the Senate. I think it is strengthening, the Senate. Mr. Speaker, the other thing, and the Chair, that I think is coming on our table is the issue of the pandemic, which we have dealt with. We had
All right, so that is the minority leader in the Senate, Siaya, Senator James Orengo. They are speaking at a strategic meeting currently underway in Mombasa County. The Senate leadership is having this meeting to just reflect on the fourth session and prioritize their fifth session. A lot of issues are emanating from this meeting that will shape how business is going to be conducted at the Senate. We will stay close to that particular meeting for you, just to give you a brief and an update on what is coming forth from that particular sitting. In studio, we've been talking about the handshake 3 years on as we mark the anniversary since President Uhuru Kenyatta and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga shook hands in a symbolic truce to put their differences aside and just sort of work with this country towards a peaceful destination and towards a place where Kenyans would put their political differences aside and work together as one bloc. And it has taken several twists and turns. We have taken a better part of this conversation just trying to dissect some of the issues, the challenges, the ups and the downs of the BBI train. And we are just going to be continuing in that momentum. We still invite you to continue interacting with us. Before we took that particular link, ladies and gentlemen, we had just started to talk about the divisive elections, the perennial problem we have been witnessing, and whether time is ripe or whether we are ready, let me use that, whether we are ready as a country to have peaceful, tear gas-free, chaos-free elections in this particular country. I cited the example of the recent by-elections in Kabuchai, in Matungu, in Nakuru, and what came forth after those by-elections, the scuffle that we witnessed, and just sort of asking whether, even if we are having this hope that the BBI initiative will solve this problem of divisive elections, are we ready to conduct ourselves in that manner? And you had just started responding to that. I'm not quite sure whether, Job, you had an opportunity to also tell me what you read from that. But as you do that also, let's take this forward, post-2022, in the event that, yes, the referendum has come and gone, assuming we've passed the BBI because of what is centered in it to address the problem of divisive elections, and the elections are disputed, and we find ourselves in a similar scenario like in 2017, in 2007. Where does this leave us then? What will the BBI process have solved?
Yeah, if I may start it from where we left it a bit. The electoral reforms part of the BBI, in my view, has not been tackled very well. Of course, the other issues that cause violence have been dealt with. That is not the winner take all. You can have a position, you can become leader of opposition and all that. But how to reform that electoral body is still divisive. You remember in the task force recommendation, even the very first one, even the first of BBI 2 had been a proposal which is supported by ODM, where commissioners are selected by parties. But that was not very palatable to, for instance, Ruto and to sections of Jubilee that support the president. And it was removed. Very controversially, by the way, because it was already in BBI 2. So somewhere along the night, it disappeared. Now, those are some of the things which are very dangerous. The thing disappeared after it had been agreed on by the task force. My view, despite what Kriegler recommended about professionalization of the IBC must be professionalized, but the commissioners, in my view, needs to be selected by people who are playing the game. If there was a commissioner currently who was appointed by ODM. One was appointed by ANC, one was appointed by Jubilee, one was appointed by UDA. That nonsense in Matungu would not have happened. That nonsense in Kabuja would not have happened. They would have said, no, this election is not an election, let's stop it. But because they are a professional body who are supposed to be independent, but we all know that everybody has a choice. And if, in fact, in a system where there are people who are playing from the deep, they could even be coerced by forces who are not overt, then they can make mistakes like what they did. So I still recommend that when this thing goes to Parliament, there's supposed to be some IBC bill or some elections bill in Parliament. Let them consider players from Parliament and outside, maybe civil society and religious bodies or whatever. Let each of those players be given a leeway to appoint a commissioner, so that we all know they are partisan, but a collective will of those commissioners will be to the good of everybody.
So that we are clear on the independence.
We are clear on that
Let's
independence.
be clear.
Yes, because this independence is theoretical. It's never independent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all these people have their choice. But the Secretariat can be very independent, in the sense that they are given standard operation procedures, they are given some governance structures, which are defined by the policy making, which are the commissioners, on what they need to do. What do you call a clean election? How do you operate when you are found in a situation where police came and chased away everybody from a polling station?
Mm-hmm.
So those SOPs should actually be set. So moving to 2022, I think electoral reforms become very key. And you always miss the boat. Kriegler had always recommended that we need to do these things 2 years with the elections. Yeah, because even this new team needs to learn these things, they need to set them up. At this rate, we are going to have new commissioners probably in December 2021. These guys have 3 months to prepare for elections.
Yeah.
It may be chaotic. In fact, it's calling for disaster. If it doesn't become chaotic, it's a miracle. So I recommend that these people, the BBI team, Parliament, and whoever else is on this, the electoral reforms becomes very key. Other than all those other sweeteners have done, electoral reforms, if they don't do it well, and you have a body which cannot do what it needs to do, then you are going to be in trouble. So 2022 portends a problem if we don't reform IBC, that's number one. And number two, if all the other actors, like Lydia said, all those other actors who are given state authority to deal with the malfeasance, police, the OPP, the Office of the DPP, and the rest, if they don't play the way they're supposed to play, then this thing will go back to the people. Now, if the people are given the choice to decide whether their candidates has won or not, then it becomes very partisan, and we can get into chaos. Yes.
Can we even have a scenario where people can agree that they lost fairly? What will it take for us to get there? But
in 2002 we did. It's possible.
In 2013,
yes,
after the presidential petition.
Because we had IPPG, PNU, that time it was DP and all the parties nominated people to the commissioner, to the ECK. So your people are in there, and they ensure that whatever they do together is the right thing. So you get some semblance of trust with what comes out of that. And that's what we need to go to. This issue of professionals, it doesn't work at that commission level. It can work at the Secretariat, but not at the commission.
It has not worked for us.
It doesn't work for us.
All right. So let's go back to the basics. And even as we're looking towards finding a solution to this, what then do you think has been the biggest contributor to divisive elections in this country, Lydia?
I think it's the sense of exclusion. So that we have a way of governing in this country where when ule MC amechaguliwa, when they are doing projects or they're doing even activities at the community level, they will focus on the areas, the villages where majority of their votes came from. And the people from the other sides, they'll get to them when they get to them. Yeah? MPs do the same. I don't know if you've maybe picked up some, chatter around things like Uwezo Fund, where the members of parliament are patrons. If your constituency is not one of those ones that really supported your ward or your area is not the ones that supported the governor, or I mean the MP, you'll find that there's a sense in which that their backs are kind of turned on you in some type of way. And that's something that the president was really trying to fight when he became president. And he said, you will not box me in Mount Kenya just because I come from Mount Kenya. I am not a president for Mount Kenya. And he ended up really making sure that resources are really distributed across the country. Projects are done everywhere. Roads are built everywhere. Institutions, TVETs and what are resourced from everywhere. And that's the kind of governance that we need. But be that as it may, what that has created is a sense of, if our person loses, we are out. We are not just out in the sense of governing, we are out in the sense that we will see no development for the next 5 years. So that perception has sat deeply within us. And so when we see our person has not won, even though we kind of trust the commission, everything has been done even to make sure this commission is perfect, the police have done an exceptional job, everybody does their jobs perfectly, that sense of, I will not be considered in development discourse, our constituency will not be funded, our county will never get money, this road we've been waiting for 10 years will not get built, that sense of we will be excluded is what now pushes people to be like, we don't care what the IBC has said. As we know that this thing has been rigged, that person is not our MP, that person is not our president, that person is not our whatever. And that is why, for me, it's about how we lead, how people lead when they are in offices. We have to remember that when we are elected, we are leaders now for all of the people, the ones who voted for us and the ones who did not vote for us. Now, if we are able to do that, we will, over time, over a period of time, perhaps 2 elections, 3, 4, create that sense of security that even if my person doesn't win, it is going to be okay. Because even last time, my person didn't win and we still got this road. That our person didn't win and we still got this and we still got that. And if we get to a place where we govern with that level of sobriety and integrity, I think we'll be able to maneuver ourselves and change the perceptions that we have that if our person is not there, we are out, and so we must fight, so that hata kama ni handshake, at least tutakuwa kwa meza tukichukua some things for ourselves, by forcing a handshake or forcing a consensus government or forcing some kind of arrangement with the person that we wanted, so that we're not left out. That's something we have to cultivate over a period of time. Yeah.
All right. Job, from where you said, because also BBI captures in one of the 9 points, there is that point of national responsibility. I want you to talk to us about that, because I find it important in a country where it's always been serikali. This is reverse. Talk to us about that national responsibility. What is it all about? What is it that I need to know as my role for this particular country?
No, we need to know that we are Kenyan, we need to be patriotic, we need to defend the Katiba. We need to act as Kenyans in manners that promote Ukenya. That is really the essence. Let all our actions promote Ukenya. And when it promotes Ukenya, those of us who get lucky to be in leadership should also behave in a manner that we decided as wananchi to prescribe for a good leader. Yeah, we have set some standards of what a good leader is in Chapter 6. We expected the MPs to pass a nice bill and an act which further gave way to Chapter 6, which unfortunately they didn't do because they know they're usually the first people to mess around with that. So let's behave in that manner that promotes the Constitution, the manner that promotes unity as one, in a manner that makes me responsible, whatever action and freedom I enjoy under this Constitution, even the current one, or even the BBI one, is I enjoy it without infringing on your right as well. So all these things combined will give us a good governance structure. For instance, like what Lydia is saying, currently you become a leader, you have some resources. Typically, most of those resources are used to further 2 things. 1, to further your own benefit, and 2, for the benefit of your next election. That's really how resources are used in this country. And that's very responsible. That's not what our Katiba says, because those resources are not yours. You are just a steward of those resources on behalf of the majority. The next thing is that the Constitution recognizes that we are diverse. Yes, I can come from County X and come from County Y and I have my culture. Yeah, let us promote that culture. In fact, they have this 26th December, which is supposed to be a day of promoting our cultures. But as we promote our cultures, let us know that our commonness This culture thing, it's good for my tribe and my region and yours, but Kenya is good for us all. So as we do our small cultures, let us act in a manner that is good for Kenya as a whole country. So my beliefs and traditions and my values down to my tribe are okay, but I should not do them either to belittle other systems, beliefs, values of that tribe, or to bring down that Utu that we are trying to bring through based on the 2010 Katiba. And the BBI is really stressing that. They call national ethos. It's a very big thing, and they have listed all sorts of things from our education system to how we behave in public. There are a lot of things that we need to do to inculcate that national ethos that we require as a nation. Yes.
I think that is something we have not really focused on before. This is something new that is being brought forth by the BBI. We're just about to wrap up, but I'd like us to address some few issues, some few concerns. One of them include the fact that some, sort of have been concerned about the role of the opposition in this handshake arrangement. Do we even still have that role, and could we be missing something as a country leader? Yes, we want to work and walk together as one bloc, but are we sort of downplaying the role of the opposition in our current governance?
I think our society as a country, we've evolved to a point where we sort of get they're called the dissenting voices. You still get the dissenting voices even if you do not necessarily have something called the official opposition. I mean, you've seen recently when the partnership between Kenya and Britain was signed, agreed upon by the executive, and it went to Parliament for vetting, and you saw farmers, independent players out there, people who export flour, these things, and coming out and saying, there's a problem with this agreement, and they lobbied Parliament, and Parliament had to, scratch the brakes on that. So I think we are caught up with sort of like a definition or a particular, actor being the official opposition. We do have dissenting voices that are always, coming up. We have a very strong strong articulation of the issue of public participation in the Constitution, and the judiciary has reinforced it. If today you pass any law, any policy, any guideline, anything that you did not take through public participation that you can demonstrate, then you're going to have somebody can be able to object to that even in High Court and have that quashed. So to that extent, we are no longer, sort of at the behest of having an official opposition, and necessarily we are able to have that public participation, and the dissenting voices are able to actually push back on a policy or on a decision without necessarily being the official opposition. Certainly, we would do much better with an official opposition, but remember, I think we miss that antagonism that it creates. That almost gridlocking of everything and anything, people opposing for the sake of opposing. Just because government has said this, they will say that. Just because government has said that, they'll say this. So which is not productive. And I think that's where we had gotten to, where it's a matter of, wanataka hii, tumekataa. Oh, wanataka hii ingine, okay, na sisi tumerudi na huku. So it was always like even not healthy, not productive, not constructive. So perhaps maybe going forward post-BBI, where we have now the office of the official opposition that is well-resourced, it's got the technical capacity to do research, it's got, the back end, of the shadow cabinet ministers and all that. Perhaps then, when it is well-facilitated like that, we can have now a constructive pushback on, on government policy and all that. But I think for now, we are still okay. I don't think we've lost the voice of dissent. It's still very much vibrant within the Kenyan nation and the public participation spaces that we have.
I'd like to move to another issue, Job, on the sustainability of this handshake journey. These are the same politicians who have made coalitions before, they've entered into political agreements before, and what do they call it? I'm trying to think of that is it?
MOU.
MOU, yeah.
The famous thing.
Yeah, so, and very few of them usually see light of day. How then can Wanjiku be affirmed and reaffirmed that this is different? What makes the handshake different?
Well, because the handshake has a product which will be glued on, like we said earlier, constitutional reform, legislative actions, administrative and policy issues. So there are some institutional and systemic things that the handshake has proposed. But if you look at the program of action, we are not there yet, even once we pass the BBI. There will be several months of actions required by government, by parliament, by we citizens, for us to fully actionalize what the BBI says. So to the people who are asking, the idea is that it will no longer be what Raila and Uhuru wanted. It will be what our Kenyan governance structure dictates. If, for instance, it is put in law that Parliament is going to have 2/3 gender, it will happen.
That happened in the 2010 Constitution.
Yes, but the 2010 had a provision to leave politicians again to make something. What we have learned in this country is that never leave politicians a window to actualize something which is required by the wananchi.
All right.
Yeah, once you get opportunity, the wananchi in the katiba, put it there so that it is done.
We've come to the end of this conversation. I'd like to give you 30 seconds each for your final remarks as we wind up. Lydia?
My final remarks have to do with reflections on yesterday when we had International Women's Day. And as we talk about this BBI and the post-BBI and coalitions and all those kinds of things, it's important that going forward we look out for these arrangements to have women at the center and at the front. I was just sharing the other day that this team they're trying to form with Mudavadi and Kalonzo and that entire group of people, and even if Raila and Uhuru and whoever decide to form a coalition, can they make sure that we see women in those arrangements that they have, so that we all really do feel included and represented. Let's see intergenerationalness in those arrangements and coalitions that are being built, because it is the women and it is the young people who really have made sure that this BBI has passed in those county assemblies. They're stakeholders. They're expected to pass it. They're expected again to participate in the elections. Let us see them really at the front and center of these arrangements.
All right, thank you, Lydia. Job?
For me, there is something which is not very talked about on the BBI, what they call shared prosperity. This is a chance for all the regions to find out what is best in their regions that can give economic output. We always talk about what can the government give us, but we rarely talk about what can we give to the society. So the BBI, shall it come to pass, all our leaders, and in fact all of us, should look at that section whereby we try to grow value, to generate value from our regions. If our region is good in fishing, let's generate value there. If our region is good in mining, let's generate value there. If it is good in pastoralism, let's generate value there, so that the whole country can contribute more to this kitty that everybody wants to share, rather than always waiting to share, but we don't contribute to it equally. Thank you.
I don't know, in the next few months coming, as we wait for the referendum, what would you like to tell Kenyans to think about to really inform their decision on the BBI process? What is it that should we focus on as Wanjiku?
We should focus, first of all, we should focus on what touches on our lives at a personal level. If you have your ward MCA having some resources that can resolve some small things like a pothole in the neighborhood, that can very easily be able to facilitate a dispensary or a clinic that is nearby where children can go and get their cough medication or something like that. Those are the things that we should consider. And if BBI you find that is delivering those things to you, then that is important, to pass. For women, look at the space that has been expanded in terms of decision making. Look at the Senate. It's now going to be 50% male, 50% female. We have never had women equalized in any institution in this country until now. And that means that women will have the room to determine how the resources, how much resources going to their counties, and perhaps even how those resources are spent. Prioritize areas that have kept women behind, such as water, childcare, and those kinds of things. And so I think people should look at the BBI from their perspective, where they sit, what matters to them, and really look in the BBI, is there something for me in here? And if it is there, vote yes. If you don't find anything useful to you as a person, then you can, keep your mind open and try to, keep the noise, the political noise about Prime Minister and 5 positions a little bit at bay. Look at it from your own perspective, at the family level, at the community level, and see if there's something that is coming to you directly, then definitely it is something good for you.
Ujite mkutano.
Ujite mkutano, uangalie kitu.
Job.
No, it's very well said from Lydia.
Yes,
it has to be
personal.
What is it for me? Then coming out from you, that's when you can look at other things. So if this thing does not help you in any way as a Kenyan, then say no. But if there's something there, and there are a lot of things, for sure, if I may pigia debe, there are a lot of things there that are very good for us as a nation. I talked of shared prosperity. I've talked of looking at how we can generate more from our regions. I've talked of how this money that we all contribute to in one way or the other. Now, a lot of it comes back to us. Not a lot. Some of it comes back to us. In fact, we need to get even more to us. Now, if we can take that and using your responsibility as a person, wherever you are, holding your leader to account and trying to influence how that resource which the leader has and is a steward of to help you, then we are good.
Can you perhaps have a multi-choice? That there has been a proposal for that. Is it even realistic? I may not be entirely against BBI, but I may not be entirely for BBI. Is there a possibility and room for having a multi-choice?
You know, the BBI is something you call a political consensus document, where some people took something, others got something, others had to cede something. So it was sort of like a give and take. If you give these ones this one, also give these other ones this one, so that there's some kind of balance. If you open it up for people to make a multi-choice, you will defeat that consensus sense of the document. So it has got to be a yes or a no. You take the good with the bad and you take the bad with the good, so that everybody, because what you might think is bad is perhaps what I had to concede. I had to concede it for someone else to get, so I could get the good that I wanted. So I think it's impossible for you to separate. Remember also, if you have it separated, you could have a clause pass that requires another one to be implemented, right? So you might have, for example, the women in the Senate, right? You think that's really good, so you approve that one. But then you go and say, I don't want many people in leadership, so me, I'm rejecting this additional, I don't know, parliament number of 300 and something. So if you do that, you will have defeated the Senate numbers, and so if you open it up like that, you'd have to take all Kenyans through a master's degree, in law development, and it's just not going to work.
Understand.
Yeah, so I think it's not practical to expect the BBI to be split into portions.
You share the same sense?
Yes, it's not practical, and in fact, you will take a week voting. If all those clauses are to put into multi-choice, take a week voting, and tallying will become so difficult. Again, it's also a lazy argument by those who oppose the BBI. Nothing stopped them like Ekuru Court did. If there are some things they are really dear about, they could have gone out and started another process. This time they were saying no to this one of Raila and Uhuru, if we call it so. They will have also gone ahead and did theirs. We will be having 2 bills, for instance, on whatever the referendum will be. But it was a lazy argument. Referendum choices are difficult. It's logistically hard and mathematically difficult.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for creating time for us. Lydia Mathia, a political strategist, thank you for creating time, and Job Ndege, governance and leadership expert, sharing their thoughts and insights with me today as we were having a conversation on the handshake anniversary. I understand and believe that now, wherever you've been watching this from, you understand 1 or 2, 3 things on what should inform your choice on whether to support or not to support this particular initiative. My name is Serfine Achieng Oma, and our sign language interpreter has been Byron Abuli. We are now going to be paving way for Tamrini, the Swahili version of the program. Nancy Okware is coming up for that.
fanya hivi, wewe teremuka tu chini. Hata watu wanangojea